Imagine drifting down the Nile at twilight, the water glowing gold as the sun slips behind temple walls, and the air thick with incense and mystery. The Egyptians did not see themselves as living in an ordinary world. They believed they walked side by side with gods, spirits, and cosmic forces that shaped every breath of life. To them, the divine was not distant or abstract, it was everywhere. The rising sun was Ra's daily triumph. The flooding river was Hapi's generous gift, and the stars were the watchful eyes of Horus. This divine world was not a quiet one. It was crowded, noisy, and endlessly fascinating. Gods had animal heads, human bodies, and personalities ranging from nurturing to downright terrifying. Some were gentle protectors, others fierce warriors, and many were both depending on the mood of the myth. The Egyptians explained the mysteries of birth, death, harvest, and flood through these divine figures, weaving them into every ritual, every temple, and every story carved into stone. The temples of Egypt were not just places of worship. They were cosmic theaters where gods were honored with music, offerings, and elaborate ceremonies. Priests acted as intermediaries, ensuring that the gods were pleased and that the delicate balance of truth, order, and harmony was maintained. Without the gods, the Nile would not flood, the crops would not grow, and the sun might not rise. In short, the divine world was the engine of existence. And yet, for all their seriousness, Egyptian myths could be wonderfully dramatic, even humorous. Gods fought, tricked one another, fell in love, and occasionally got drunk on beer, dyed red to look like blood. These stories were not just sacred, they were entertaining, passed down like bedtime tales that blended awe with amusement. So, as we begin this journey into the divine world of ancient Egypt, prepare yourself for falcon-headed kings, lioness warriors, cat protectors, and crocodile guardians. It is a pantheon unlike any other, a world where every grain of sand and every drop of water carried divine meaning. And if you're already feeling sleepy, that's perfectly fine. Egyptian myths are best absorbed slowly, like the steady flow of the Nile. And hey, before you drift off, don't forget to like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, preferably in a yawning, half-asleep way, so I know this history lecture is doing its job. To understand the Egyptian pantheon, one must first step into the mindset of a civilization that lived in constant dialogue with nature. The Nile flooded each year, bringing life to the desert. The sun rose and set with unerring rhythm. Crocodiles lurked in the waters, jackals prowled the sands, and cats curled in homes. Every force, every creature, every mystery seemed too powerful to be left unexplained. And so, the Egyptians filled their world with gods. Polytheism was not a matter of choice, it was a necessity. Each god represented a piece of existence, a fragment of the puzzle that made life possible. Ra embodied the sun, Osiris, the afterlife, Isis, magic and healing, Horus, kingship, and Anubis, the solemn art of mummification. To ignore any of them would be to ignore the forces that governed survival. The Egyptians believed that the divine was not singular, but layered. A farmer might pray to Hapi, the god of the Nile, for fertile floods. A mother might call upon Hathor for protection during childbirth. A soldier might invoke Sekhmet, the lioness of war, before battle. Each god had a role, and together they formed a cosmic bureaucracy, ensuring that the universe ran smoothly. This belief also reflected Egypt's geography. Different regions had their own local gods, often tied to specific animals or natural features. Over time, these local deities merged into larger traditions, creating a pantheon that was both diverse and unified. A crocodile god in one town might be Sobek, while a falcon god in another was Horus. The Egyptians did not see contradiction in this, they saw abundance. Humorously, one might say the Egyptian pantheon was like an overcrowded office, with gods constantly merging departments, splitting duties, and occasionally fighting over who was in charge. Amun merged with Ra to become Amun-Ra, the ultimate boss. Set tried to overthrow Osiris, only to be sued in divine court by Horus. It was divine drama, but it explained the chaos and order of the world. In the end, Egyptians believed in many gods because life itself was many-layered. The desert, the river, the sun, the stars, the animals, the crops, all demanded reverence. To worship one god alone would have been to oversimplify existence. By honoring many, they honored the fullness of life. And so, the pantheon grew, sprawling across centuries, filling temples and tombs, and weaving itself into every aspect of Egyptian society. It was not just religion, it was the architecture of reality, a divine map of the world that guided Egyptians through birth, death, and eternity. The Nile was more than a river. It was the heartbeat of Egypt, the eternal vein that carried life through the desert. Without its waters, there would have been no crops, no cities, no civilization. To the Egyptians, the Nile was not simply a natural feature, it was divine, a sacred force that explained the very origins of their gods. Each year, the river flooded, spreading rich black silt across the land. This cycle of inundation, growth, and harvest mirrored the cycle of life, death, and rebirth that defined Egyptian belief. The gods themselves were imagined as emerging from this rhythm. Creation myths often began with the primeval waters, a vast, endless flood from which the first mound of earth rose. Upon that mound, Adam, the self-created god, appeared, bringing light, order, and the beginnings of the pantheon. The Nile was thus both a physical and spiritual source. Its waters were linked to Hapi, the god of fertility and abundance, who was depicted as a plump figure with offerings of grain and fish. Hapi's generosity ensured that Egypt thrived, and his floods were celebrated with hymns and rituals. To neglect Hapi was unthinkable, for without him the land would wither. The river also connected to Osiris, the god of the afterlife. Osiris was associated with vegetation and renewal, and the annual flooding of the Nile was seen as his gift, a symbol of resurrection. Just as the waters returned each year, so too did life return after death, guided by Osiris's eternal presence. The Nile's sacred role extended beyond agriculture. It was the highway of Egypt, carrying boats, goods, and people. Temples lined its banks, their columns reflecting in the water, as if the gods themselves were gazing into the river's mirror. The Egyptians believed that the Nile was a bridge between worlds, connecting the living with the divine, the earthly with the eternal. In this way, the Nile was not just a river, but the womb of creation, the stage upon which the gods were born, and the drama of existence unfolded. Its waters whispered of beginnings, its floods promised renewal, and its endless flow reminded Egyptians that life itself was a gift of the divine. And so, when the people looked upon the Nile, they did not see only water. They saw the breath of gods, the cradle of myths, and the eternal mystery of the sacred river that gave birth to their world. In the endless desert of Egypt, where the horizon stretches wide and the sky blazes with light, the sun was not just a celestial body, it was the very heartbeat of existence. To the Egyptians, the rising of the sun each morning was proof that life continued, that order triumphed over chaos, and that the gods had not abandoned the world. At the center of this cosmic drama stood Ra, the great sun god, the creator of life, and one of the most powerful deities in the Egyptian pantheon. Ra was often depicted with the head of a falcon, crowned by a blazing solar disk, a symbol of his dominion over the heavens. Each day, he sailed across the sky in his solar bark, illuminating the land, nourishing the crops, and sustaining the rhythm of life. Each night, he descended into the underworld, where he faced the serpent Apophis, embodiment of chaos, who sought to devour the sun and plunge the world into eternal darkness. The Egyptians believed that Ra's nightly victory over Apophis was essential for the dawn to return. Without Ra's triumph, the world would collapse into shadow. But Ra was more than just the sun. He was the creator, the one who brought the world into being. In some myths, Ra emerged from the primeval waters of Nun, shining forth on the first mound of earth. From his tears, humanity was born. From his laughter, the gods themselves came into existence. He was the father of order, the architect of the cosmos, and the eternal source of energy. Ra's influence extended into politics and society. Pharaohs claimed to be his earthly sons, ruling with divine authority granted by the sun god. Temples dedicated to Ra, such as the great complexes at Heliopolis, were centers of worship and learning where priests studied astronomy, performed rituals, and ensured that Ra's journey across the sky remained unbroken. Over time, Ra's identity merged with other gods, reflecting Egypt's evolving religious landscape. In Thebes, he combined with Amun to become Amun-Ra, a supreme deity embodying both hidden power and radiant light. This fusion elevated Ra to the highest position in the pantheon, a god of gods, worshipped across the land. Ra's mythology carried both grandeur and subtle humor. In one tale, when humanity angered him, Ra sent the fierce lioness goddess Sekhmet to punish them. Her rampage was so terrifying that the gods had to trick her into drinking beer dyed red to resemble blood. She became drunk, calmed down, and transformed into the gentler half. Even the sun god's wrath could be softened with cleverness and a bit of divine trickery. For the Egyptians, Ra was not distant. He was present in every sunrise, every shadow, every breath of life. His journey across the sky was a reminder that existence was fragile, that chaos lurked in the darkness, and that only through divine order could the world endure. And so Ra remained the eternal light, the god who rose each morning, who fought each night, and who created life itself. To watch the sun climb above the desert was to witness Ra's triumph, a daily miracle that bound heaven and earth together in the mysteries of the Nile. Long before temples rose along the Nile and before the sun god Ra sailed across the sky, the Egyptians imagined a time when nothing existed but endless waters, the primeval flood known as Nun. Out of this infinite sea, a small mound of earth emerged, the first solid ground in a world of liquid chaos. Upon this mound appeared Adam, the self-created god, the spark of existence, the one who brought order out of nothingness. Adam was unique among the gods because he had no parents, no origin beyond himself. He was the embodiment of completeness, the first being who contained all potential within his form. From Adam came the first act of creation. He produced Shu, the god of air, and Tefnut, the goddess of moisture. Together, they formed the foundation of life, separating sky from earth and allowing the world to take shape. The myth continues with Shu and Tefnut giving birth to Geb, the earth god, and Nut, the sky goddess. Their union created the stage upon which all other gods and humans would live. From Geb and Nut came Osiris, Isis, Set, and Nephesis, the divine siblings whose stories would define Egyptian mythology. In this way, Adam's solitary act of creation unfolded into a vast family of gods, each representing a force of nature or aspect of existence. Adam was often depicted as a man wearing the double crown of Egypt, symbolizing his authority over both Upper and Lower Egypt. He was also associated with the setting sun, representing completion and the return to unity. Just as the sun disappears into the horizon at dusk, Adam embodied the idea of returning to the source, the eternal cycle of beginning and end. For the Egyptians, Adam's story was not just a myth, but a reminder of the fragile balance between chaos and order. The primeval waters of Nun always lingered, threatening to reclaim the world. It was Adam's act of creation that held chaos at bay, establishing the structure of the cosmos and the rhythm of life. And so, Adam stood at the dawn of existence, the solitary god who rose from the waters, shaped the first breath of air, and laid the foundation for the divine world of Egypt. His creation was the first chapter in the endless story of gods, kings, and the mysteries of the Nile. Among all the gods of Egypt, none carried a story as dramatic or as central to the Egyptian imagination as Osiris. He was the green-skinned ruler of the underworld, the eternal judge of souls, and the symbol of rebirth. His tale was not only about death, but about the promise of life after death, a theme that shaped Egyptian religion for thousands of years. Osiris was once a king on earth, ruling wisely and bringing civilization to humanity. He taught people farming, laws, and rituals, becoming a beloved figure. But his jealous brother, Set, god of chaos and storms, plotted against him. In the most famous myth, Set tricked Osiris into lying inside a beautifully decorated chest, then sealed it and cast it into the Nile. Later, Set dismembered Osiris, scattering his body parts across Egypt. It was Isis, Osiris's devoted wife, who gathered the pieces, reassembled him, and through her magic brought him back to life. Yet Osiris could not return to the living world. Instead, he became lord of the underworld, presiding over the dead and ensuring that justice was upheld in eternity. His resurrection became the model for all Egyptians, who believed that through proper rituals and devotion, they too could rise again after death. Osiris was depicted as a mummified figure wrapped in white linen, holding the crook and flail, symbols of kingship. His green skin represented vegetation and renewal, linking him to the cycles of the Nile and the rebirth of crops after the flood. In this way, Osiris was not only the god of the dead, but also of life's renewal, embodying the eternal rhythm of decay and growth. The myth of Osiris carried profound lessons. It showed that death was not the end, but a passage. It taught that loyalty, love, and justice could overcome even the darkest chaos. And it gave Egyptians hope that their souls, like Osiris, could rise again, judged fairly and welcomed into paradise. Thus, Osiris stood as the eternal king of the afterlife, a god whose story blended tragedy with triumph, and whose presence made the mysteries of death less fearful, more meaningful, and forever tied to the flowing waters of the Nile. Among the Egyptian pantheon, Isis stood out as one of the most beloved and enduring figures. She was not only a goddess, but a symbol of devotion, wisdom, and the mysterious power of magic. Her presence touched nearly every aspect of life, from family and motherhood to healing and protection. And her worship spread far beyond Egypt, reaching into the Greco-Roman world, where she remained revered for centuries. Isis was the wife of Osiris and the mother of Horus, and her story is inseparable from theirs. When Osiris was murdered and dismembered by his brother Set, it was Isis who searched tirelessly across the land, gathering the scattered pieces of her husband. Through her unmatched magical skill, she reassembled him and breathed life back into him, allowing Osiris to become ruler of the underworld. This act of love and determination made Isis the eternal symbol of loyalty and resilience. Her role as mother was equally important. She raised Horus in secret, protecting him from Set's wrath, and nurtured him until he was strong enough to claim his rightful place as king of the gods. In this way, Isis embodied the protective power of motherhood, guarding not only her own child, but also the people of Egypt, who saw her as their divine mother. Isis was often depicted as a woman wearing a throne-shaped crown, signifying her role as the seat of kingship. Sometimes she appeared with cow horns and a solar disk, linking her to Hathor and the nurturing aspects of fertility. She was also shown spreading her wings in protective embrace, shielding the living and the dead alike. Her magic was legendary. In one tale, Isis tricked Ra himself into revealing his secret name, a word of immense power, by creating a serpent that bit him, and then offering to heal him only if he surrendered the hidden knowledge. This story highlighted her cunning, her mastery of spells, and her ability to wield divine authority through wisdom rather than brute force. For the Egyptians, Isis was more than a goddess. She was a companion in daily life. Women prayed to her for fertility and protection during childbirth. Families invoked her for healing and safety. Pharaohs honored her as the divine mother who legitimized their rule. Her temples became centers of devotion, filled with hymns, offerings, and rituals that celebrated her boundless compassion. Isis's legacy endured long after the fall of Egypt's ancient religion. In the Roman Empire, her cult spread widely, with temples dedicated to her across Europe and the Mediterranean. Her image as a mother and healer influenced later traditions, echoing in symbols of divine motherhood that carried forward into new faiths. Isis was the goddess who stitched together brokenness, who healed wounds, who protected the vulnerable, and who reminded humanity that love and magic could overcome even death itself. In the mysteries of the Nile, she was the eternal mother, the healer, and the magician whose wings still seemed to stretch across time. Horus was one of the most important gods in the Egyptian pantheon, a divine falcon soaring above the skies, watching over the land, and embodying the very essence of kingship. His sharp eyes were said to be the sun and the moon. His wings stretched across the heavens, and his presence symbolized protection, authority, and victory. The story of Horus is inseparable from the drama of Osiris and Set. After Set murdered Osiris, Isis raised Horus in secret, protecting him until he was strong enough to challenge his uncle. Their battles were fierce and legendary, filled with transformations, contests, and even divine court trials. In one myth, Horus lost his left eye during combat, but it was restored by Thoth, becoming the famous Eye of Horus, a symbol of healing, protection, and wholeness. Ultimately, Horus triumphed over Set, avenging his father and claiming rightful kingship. This victory was more than a myth. It became the foundation of Egyptian political ideology. Pharaohs were considered the living embodiment of Horus, ruling as his earthly representatives. Each coronation was not just a political act, but a divine affirmation that Horus's authority continued through the ruler. Depictions of Horus often show him as a falcon, or a man with a falcon's head, crowned with the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt. His image adorned temples, jewelry, and amulets, serving as a constant reminder of protection and divine legitimacy. The Eye of Horus, in particular, became one of the most powerful symbols in Egyptian culture, used to guard against evil and ensure health and prosperity. Horus's mythology carried both grandeur and humanity. He was a warrior, a son, a king, and a symbol of resilience. His battles with Set reflected the eternal struggle between order and chaos, while his restored eye reminded Egyptians that even in loss, healing and renewal were possible. Through Horus, the Egyptians found not only a god of the sky, but also a divine protector of their rulers and their land. His falcon gaze watched over the Nile, the temples, and the people, ensuring that the balance of power and justice remained intact in the mysteries of the Nile. Set was the god who embodied everything unpredictable and unsettling in the Egyptian world. Where other deities represented order, fertility, or protection, Set stood for chaos, violence, and the harshness of the desert. He was the storm that shattered calm skies, the barren sands that swallowed life, and the force of disruption that constantly threatened balance. Depicted with a strange animal head, scholars still debate whether it was a donkey, jackal, or a mythical hybrid. Set's image was deliberately unsettling. He was not meant to be comforting. He was the reminder that chaos was always near. His most infamous act was the murder of his brother Osiris, a crime that tore apart the divine family and set in motion the eternal struggle between Set and Horus. Yet Set was not purely evil. In some traditions, he played a necessary role in defending Ra's solar bark during its nightly journey through the underworld. When the serpent Apophis rose to devour the sun, Set stood at the prow, striking the monster with his spear. Even chaos had its place in maintaining cosmic order. Set's dual nature reflected the Egyptians' understanding of the world. The desert was dangerous, but it protected Egypt from invaders. Storms were destructive, but they cleared the air. Chaos was terrifying, but it was also part of the balance of existence. Set was feared, but he was also respected as a force that could not be ignored. His mythology, especially the battles with Horus, symbolized the eternal tension between order and disorder. Horus represented kingship and stability. Set represented disruption and rebellion. Their conflict was not just a family feud, but a cosmic drama, reminding Egyptians that harmony was never guaranteed. It had to be fought for, maintained, and renewed. Set was the god of deserts, storms, and destruction, but also the reminder that chaos is woven into the fabric of life. In the mysteries of the Nile, he was the shadow at the edge of the light, the storm on the horizon, and the eternal challenge to order. Anubis was the jackal-headed god who stood watch over the mysteries of death and burial. To the Egyptians, he was not a figure of fear, but of protection, guiding souls safely through the transition from life to eternity. His presence was felt in every tomb, every embalming ritual, and every prayer whispered for the dead. Anubis's role was central to the practice of mummification. He was believed to oversee the embalming process, ensuring that bodies were preserved correctly so that the soul could recognize and return to its form in the afterlife. Priests performing these sacred rites often wore masks of Anubis, symbolically becoming the god himself as they worked. He was also the guardian of cemeteries, keeping watch against desecration and protecting the resting places of the departed. His jackal form reflected the scavengers that prowled the desert edges. But instead of destruction, Anubis represented guardianship, turning a symbol of danger into one of divine safety. Perhaps his most famous role was in the weighing of the heart ceremony. Anubis guided souls into the hall of judgment, where their hearts were weighed against the feather of Mat, the goddess of truth and order. If the heart was pure and light, the soul could pass into paradise. If heavy with sin, it was devoured by Ammit, the fearsome creature of the underworld. Anubis ensured that this process was fair, impartial, and just. Depictions of Anubis show him as a sleek black jackal or a man with a jackal's head, his dark color symbolizing both death and the fertile soil of the Nile, which promised rebirth. He was a god of endings, but also of beginnings, embodying the transition between worlds. For the Egyptians, Anubis was a comforting presence. He was the one who stood beside them in death, who guarded their tombs, who ensured their bodies were preserved, and who guided their souls toward judgment. In the mysteries of the Nile, Anubis was the eternal guardian, silent, watchful, and steadfast in his duty to protect the passage from life into eternity. Thoth was the great scribe of the gods, the keeper of knowledge, and the master of words. In a civilization where writing was considered sacred, Thoth stood as the divine patron of hieroglyphs, wisdom, and the balance of thought. His presence was felt in every temple inscription, every scroll of papyrus, and every ritual where words carried the power to shape reality. Depicted most often with the head of an ibis, or sometimes as a baboon, Thoth embodied intelligence and precision. He was believed to have invented writing, giving humanity the ability to record history, laws, prayers, and stories. In this way, he preserved memory against the erosion of time, ensuring that the deeds of gods and men would not be forgotten. Thoth's role extended far beyond writing. He was the god of wisdom, mathematics, and astronomy, guiding priests and scholars in their studies of the stars and the rhythms of the Nile. He was also the divine mediator, settling disputes among gods and maintaining cosmic order. In myths, when Horus and Set battled for kingship, Thoth acted as judge, ensuring fairness in the divine court. In the underworld, Thoth played a crucial role in the weighing of the heart ceremony. As Anubis guided souls to judgment, Thoth recorded the results, acting as the impartial scribe of eternity. His presence guaranteed that justice was not only done but documented, a divine record that could never be erased. Thoth was also linked to the moon, balancing Ra's solar power with his own cool, reflective light. Just as the moon measured time and marked cycles, Thoth embodied the steady rhythm of knowledge and order. His dual role as scribe and lunar god made him a figure of balance, harmonizing light and dark, chaos and order, speech and silence. For the Egyptians, Thoth was indispensable. He was the god who gave them writing, who taught them wisdom, who ensured fairness, and who illuminated the mysteries of the cosmos. In the mysteries of the Nile, Thoth was the eternal scribe, the quiet voice of reason, and the guardian of knowledge that shaped both gods and men. Hathor was one of the most radiant and beloved figures in the Egyptian pantheon, a goddess who embodied love, music, dance, fertility, and joy. Where other deities carried the weight of judgment or the fury of war, Hathor brought comfort, celebration, and beauty into the lives of the people. She was the divine mother, the nurturer, and the patroness of happiness. Depicted often as a woman with cow horns and a solar disk, or sometimes as a full cow, Hathor symbolized nourishment and abundance. She was closely tied to motherhood and fertility, protecting women during childbirth and ensuring the growth of families. Her temples were filled with music and offerings, reflecting her role as a goddess of pleasure and festivity. Hathor's influence extended beyond the household. She was also the goddess of foreign lands and trade, welcoming travelers and merchants. Her protective nature made her a guardian of journeys, ensuring safe passage across deserts and seas. One of her most famous myths connects her to Sekhmet. When humanity angered Ra, he sent Sekhmet to punish them, but her rampage threatened to destroy all life. To calm her, the gods tricked her into drinking beer, dyed red to resemble blood. As she became intoxicated, her fury softened, and she transformed into Hathor, the gentle goddess of love and joy. This story highlighted the duality of divine power, destruction and compassion, wrath and tenderness. Hathor was also linked to the afterlife, welcoming souls into paradise with music and comfort. She was seen as a celestial mother, guiding the dead into eternal peace. Her presence reassured Egyptians that death was not only judgment, but also reunion with divine love. For the people of Egypt, Hathor was a goddess of everyday life. She was invoked in songs, dances, and festivals. Her name carried in laughter and celebration. In the mysteries of the Nile, Hathor was the gentle light, the goddess who reminded humanity that joy, love, and beauty were as sacred as order and justice. Sekhmet was one of the fiercest and most awe-inspiring goddesses in the Egyptian pantheon. Known as the Lioness of War, she embodied destruction, fire, and vengeance, yet also carried the power of healing and protection. Her dual nature made her both feared and revered, a goddess who could devastate enemies but also safeguard the faithful. Depicted as a woman with the head of a lioness crowned by a solar disk, Sekhmet represented the blazing heat of the sun and the ferocity of battle. She was said to breathe fire against her foes, her roar echoing across the desert like thunder. Pharaohs invoked her strength before going to war, believing she would strike down their enemies with unstoppable fury. One of her most famous myths tells of Ra sending Sekhmet to punish humanity when they rebelled against him. Her rampage was so terrifying that she nearly wiped out mankind. To stop her, the gods dyed beer red to resemble blood and offered it to her. Sekhmet drank deeply, became intoxicated, and transformed into the gentler Hathor, goddess of love and joy. This story revealed her duality: destruction tempered by compassion, wrath softened into nurture. Despite her fearsome reputation, Sekhmet was also associated with healing. Priests of Sekhmet were skilled in medicine, and her power was invoked to cure disease as well as to ward off plagues. She was seen as a protector of balance, punishing wrongdoing but restoring health and harmony when honored properly. For the Egyptians, Sekhmet symbolized the raw forces of nature, dangerous, unpredictable, yet essential. She was the scorching sun, the raging storm, the lioness defending her pride. In the mysteries of the Nile, Sekhmet was the reminder that destruction and renewal are two sides of the same divine power, and that even the fiercest goddess could hold within her the seeds of healing. Bastet was one of the most cherished goddesses in Egypt, a divine guardian who combined gentleness with fierce protection. She was the goddess of the home, family, fertility, and domestic joy. Yet she also carried the sharp claws of a lioness when defending those under her care. This duality made her both comforting and formidable, a deity who could purr softly yet strike fiercely when danger approached. Depicted most often as a woman with the head of a cat, or sometimes as a full feline, Bastet symbolized grace, affection, and vigilance. Cats were sacred animals in Egypt, admired for their ability to protect households from pests and snakes. To harm a cat was considered a grave offense, for it was seen as an insult to Bastet herself. Families often kept cats not only for practical reasons, but also as living embodiments of the goddess's blessing. Bastet's role extended beyond the household. She was also a goddess of fertility and childbirth, invoked by women seeking protection during pregnancy and delivery. Her nurturing side made her a divine mother figure, ensuring the health and safety of families. Yet Bastet was not only gentle. In earlier traditions, she was closely linked to the lioness goddess Sekhmet, embodying ferocity and war. Over time, her image softened into the domestic cat, but her protective nature remained. She was the shield of the innocent, the defender of harmony, and the silent watcher against evil spirits. Festivals dedicated to Bastet were lively and joyful, filled with music, dance, and offerings. Pilgrims traveled to her temple at Bubastis, where celebrations honored her as both a loving mother and a vigilant guardian. These gatherings reflected her dual nature, joyous yet sacred, playful yet powerful. For the Egyptians, Bastet was the goddess who lived closest to them, in their homes, beside their families, and in the quiet companionship of cats. In the mysteries of the Nile, she was the gentle protector, the divine presence, who reminded them that love and safety were sacred gifts, guarded by the watchful eyes of a goddess, with the heart of a mother and the claws of a lioness. Mat was not just a goddess. She was the very principle that held the universe together. To the Egyptians, Mat represented truth, justice, balance, and harmony, the invisible thread that kept chaos at bay and ensured that the cosmos remained in perfect order. Without her, the sun would not rise, the Nile would not flood, and society itself would collapse. Depicted as a woman wearing an ostrich feather on her head, Mat's symbol became one of the most important in Egyptian religion. This feather was used in the famous weighing of the heart ceremony, where the soul of the deceased was judged. If the heart was lighter than Mat's feather, the soul was pure and allowed to enter paradise. If heavier, it was devoured by Ammit, the fearsome creature of the underworld. Mat's influence extended far beyond the afterlife. Pharaohs were seen as guardians of Mat, responsible for maintaining justice and balance in the land. Laws, rituals, and daily life were all guided by her principles. To live in accordance with Mat meant living truthfully, fairly, and in harmony with others and with nature. Her presence was felt in every aspect of Egyptian culture. Priests invoked her during rituals, judges upheld her in courts, and ordinary people sought to align their lives with her ideals. Mat was not a distant deity, but a living principle, woven into the rhythm of existence. In the mysteries of the Nile Ma, At was the eternal balance, the goddess who reminded Egyptians that truth and harmony were sacred, that justice was divine, and that only by honoring her could the fragile order of the world endure. For the ancient Egyptians, death was not an ending, but a passage into another realm, the mysterious underworld known as Duat. This was a place both feared and revered, filled with trials, guardians, and divine judges. To reach paradise, every soul had to journey through Duat, facing challenges that tested their purity and devotion. The underworld was imagined as a vast landscape of rivers, caverns, and gates, guarded by fearsome creatures and deities. Each stage of the journey demanded knowledge of secret spells and prayers, many of which were recorded in the Book of the Dead. These texts served as a guidebook, ensuring the deceased could navigate the dangers and present themselves worthily before the gods. Ra himself traveled through Duat each night, sailing in his solar bark. As he descended, he battled the serpent Apophis, the embodiment of chaos, before rising again at dawn. This nightly voyage symbolized the eternal cycle of death and rebirth, reminding Egyptians that even the sun had to pass through darkness to shine again. At the heart of the underworld lay the Hall of Judgment, where Osiris presided as Lord of the Dead. Here, the soul's heart was weighed against the feather of Mat, the goddess of truth and balance. A heart free of sin could enter the blissful field of reeds, a paradise where the deceased lived eternally, farming, feasting, and enjoying the joys of life without hardship. But a heart heavy with wrongdoing was devoured by Ammit, the terrifying soul-eater, ending existence forever. The Egyptian underworld was not simply a place of punishment. It was a realm of transformation. It offered hope that through righteousness, devotion, and proper rituals, one could achieve eternal life. Tombs, mummies, and funerary texts all reflected this belief, ensuring that the journey through Duat was prepared for and protected. In the mysteries of the Nile, the underworld was the great test, a shadowed realm where chaos lurked, but where justice and renewal awaited those who lived in harmony with Mat. It was the bridge between mortality and eternity, the place where every soul discovered its true destiny. For the Egyptians, death was not the end but the beginning of a great trial. The soul, once freed from the body, entered the Hall of Judgment, where its fate would be decided. This ceremony was the most important moment in the afterlife, the weighing of the heart. The heart, believed to hold a person's character and deeds, was placed on a scale opposite the feather of Marat, goddess of truth and balance. Anubis, the jackal-headed guardian of mummification, carefully adjusted the scales, while Thoth, the divine scribe, recorded the outcome. Watching over it all was Osiris, lord of the underworld, seated on his throne as the ultimate judge. If the heart was lighter than the feather, the soul was declared pure. It was then welcomed into the blissful field of reeds, a paradise where the deceased lived eternally, farming fertile lands, feasting, and enjoying the joys of life without hardship. But if the heart was heavy with sin, it was devoured by Ammit, a terrifying creature, part crocodile, lion, and hippopotamus. For such souls, there was no second chance, only eternal oblivion. This ritual reflected the Egyptians' deep belief in moral responsibility. Wealth, status, or power meant nothing in the afterlife. Only truth and righteousness mattered. To live in harmony with Mat was to prepare for this final test, ensuring that one's heart would be light when placed on the scales. The weighing of the heart was both a warning and a promise. It reminded Egyptians that every action carried eternal weight, but it also offered hope that through virtue, devotion, and balance, the soul could achieve everlasting peace. In the mysteries of the Nile, the judgment of the soul was the ultimate moment of truth, where divine justice met human destiny, and where the eternal journey was decided by the weight of a single heart. Religion in ancient Egypt was not confined to myths and stories. It was woven into the very fabric of daily life. Temples stood as the beating heart of communities. Priests served as intermediaries between gods and people, and worship was practiced both in grand rituals and in the quiet devotion of households. Temples were not places for ordinary worshippers to gather, but sacred dwellings where the gods themselves were believed to reside. Each temple was designed as a miniature cosmos, with towering pylons symbolizing the horizon, courtyards representing the earthly realm, and inner sanctuaries embodying the hidden world of the divine. The most sacred chamber housed the statue of the god, treated as a living presence. Temples like Karnak, Luxor, and Heliopolis were centers of power, wealth, and learning. Offerings of food, incense, and precious goods were made daily to sustain the gods. Festivals transformed temples into vibrant hubs with processions, music, and feasting that connected the divine with the people. Priests were the caretakers of temples and the gods within them. Their duties were demanding, requiring purity, discipline, and devotion. They bathed multiple times a day, shaved their heads, and wore clean linen to maintain ritual cleanliness. Their primary role was to perform daily rituals, awakening the god's statue, clothing it, offering meals, and reciting hymns. High priests often held political influence, advising pharaohs and managing temple wealth. While temples were reserved for priests, ordinary Egyptians practiced devotion at home and in local shrines. Families kept small statues or amulets of gods like Isis, Bastet, or Hathor for protection. Offerings of bread, beer, or flowers were made to household deities. Festivals allowed the wider population to participate, carrying statues of gods through the streets in joyous processions. Religion was not separate from life, it was life itself. Every sunrise was Ra's triumph, every harvest was Osiris's blessing, every act of justice was Mat-'s presence. Through temples, priests, and daily worship, Egyptians lived in constant dialogue with the divine, ensuring that the balance between gods and humanity was never broken. In the mysteries of the Nile, temples were the sacred homes of eternity. Priests, the guardians of divine order, and daily worship, the heartbeat of a civilization devoted to its gods. In ancient Egypt, religion was not separate from politics or daily life. It was the foundation upon which society was built. The gods were more than distant figures. They were active forces that shaped kingship, law, and the rhythm of everyday existence. Pharaohs ruled not only as political leaders, but as divine representatives, embodying the will of the gods on earth. Pharaohs were seen as the sons of Ra, the falcon form of Horus, and the earthly guardians of Mat, the principle of truth and balance. Their coronation was a sacred act, affirming their divine right to rule. Every decree, every monument, and every battle was framed as fulfilling the god's will. Pharaohs were often depicted alongside gods in temple reliefs, showing their divine partnership. They performed rituals to sustain the gods, ensuring cosmic order and prosperity for Egypt. Their legitimacy depended on maintaining harmony with Mat, proving that they ruled justly and truthfully. Religion shaped every level of Egyptian society. Farmers prayed to Osiris for fertile fields, mothers invoked Isis for protection, and craftsmen honored Ptah, patron of creation. The gods were woven into the fabric of daily life, guiding work, family, and community. Laws were seen as extensions of divine justice, rooted in mat festivals, brought entire communities together, celebrating gods with music, feasting, and processions. Temples acted as centers of economy and education, distributing food, managing land, and preserving knowledge. The relationship between gods and pharaohs was reciprocal. Pharaohs sustained the gods through offerings and rituals, while the gods legitimized the pharaoh's rule. This balance reinforced stability, ensuring that Egypt's political and religious systems worked hand in hand. Even in death, pharaohs were linked to the divine. Their tombs were designed as gateways to eternity, filled with offerings to secure their place among the gods. Ordinary Egyptians, too, sought to live in harmony with divine principles, believing that their actions would be judged in the afterlife. In the mysteries of the Nile, the gods were not distant beings, but the architects of society. They shaped kingship, guided justice, and infused daily life with sacred meaning. Through them, Egypt became not just a kingdom, but a divine order, where every sunrise, every harvest, and every law reflected the eternal bond between gods, pharaohs, and the people. Though the temples have fallen silent and the pharaohs' tombs lie buried beneath the sands, the gods of ancient Egypt continue to live on in memory, culture, and imagination. Their stories, carved into stone and painted on papyrus, have traveled across centuries, shaping art, literature, and even modern spirituality. Symbols, like the Eye of Horus, are still worn as charms of protection and healing. The goddess Isis remains a figure of devotion in various traditions, her image inspiring art and poetry far beyond Egypt. Films, novels, and games continue to retell the myths of Osiris, Ra, and Anubis, keeping their legends alive for new generations. The Egyptian emphasis on balance, truth, and justice through Mat resonates with universal human values. Their vision of the afterlife, judgment, reward, and eternal peace influenced later religious traditions, echoing in ideas of heaven, morality, and divine justice. Tourists still flock to the temples of Karnak and Luxor, marveling at the grandeur built in honor of the gods. Scholars continue to study hieroglyphs, uncovering new insights into rituals and beliefs. The gods, though no longer worshipped, remain eternal teachers of humanity's quest for meaning. And so, the mysteries of the Nile draw to a close. The gods of Egypt, Ra, Isis, Osiris, Horus, and all the rest, remind us that myths are more than stories. They are reflections of human hopes, fears, and dreams. Their legacy endures, not in temples alone, but in the way we still search for truth, balance, and eternity. The sands of time may shift, but the gods remain, whispering through history, guiding us with their timeless presence. As the night deepens and the stars shine above, let their stories rest gently in your mind, like a lullaby carried on the desert wind. Good night.